Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Perceptive podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. We have another developer interview lined up for tonight's episode. My guest is from the studio Dragon Slayer Studios, and they just recently released a deck building roguelike under the name Mythical Mayhem. And I'm sure we'll be talking a whole lot about deck building, cards, and more. So please welcome to the podcast, George Loken. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, Josh. Excited to be here and excited to get my game launched. Been a lifelong dream that I've been chasing for many years, and happy to have it kind of the start of the journey officially out.
Congratulations on the launch as well. And for people listening to us right now, the game was released in March. So probably by the time this cast goes up, should be about maybe a little over a month since release.
Sounds good. Yeah.
So, to get things started, since it's your first time on, could you talk a little bit about kind of like who you are and what your background is?
So, background is in degree in computer information systems. Been programming my whole life since I was probably 12 years old. Had an early passion for it. Love video games. I was curious on making video games. Probably started building many different video games, but I'm also a very practical person, and my parents were practical and said, "Yeah, you're not going to school to be a video game maker. Go and do stuff and work in with databases and stuff like that." So yeah, I'm quite proficient in SQL, and that's what my day job is, and database programming, but always had lots of hobbies of programming, build lots of little applications, from utilities to small games that never really took off.
For Mythical Mayhem, so this was kind of like your first like full game, like first like actual game release?
Yeah, so talk a little bit about that. I like I said, I've started on the journey of developing many games, and Mythical Mayhem, like I'll be honest here, wasn't the game that I most wanted to build necessarily, but it was the game that I knew that if I set out the guidelines and set myself some boundaries and said stay within these scopes, it was a game that I could be successful at and get released and finished. Like where my other games just kind of would be endless feature creep because I would never fully lay out the design before I started building them. I'd have tons of great ideas, but then just tangent off and get deeper and deeper and deeper into it and go, okay, well now I've got myself a real mess that's not really a playable game.
Yep, and again, especially as like your first game, it's so easy to fall into that trap of just never-ending development. Make sure it's as perfect as you can make it.
Yeah, not even necessarily perfect, but just like, I mean, I would love to build an RPG, but it's just there's a lot going on with an RPG, and it's like, okay, well, how many quests do I need to have? What do those quests look like? Where do I and I mean, I've started down that path, and I've got playable demos and stuff like that, but it's just like to realize how much more effort it would take to get to the finish line. It's like, ooh, yeah, that's still tons of work there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Especially being a solo independent.
Mm-hmm. So, for the people listening to us, what is Mythical Mayhem about?
So Mythical Mayhem is a deck building card game. It's, I would say, the one reviewer said that it reminds him of some board games, and it definitely does have some of that feel to it. Uh, I think that you said it was kind of roguelike, and maybe the randomness to it is a bit, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not like any other roguelike you're going to see. Like it definitely feels much different than anything I've seen before, and I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my my friends and I built a role playing game So we I based a lot of that loosely off like characters and even some of the names and some of the jokes behind the stuff on that role playing game that we developed. And we play ourselves internally, and obviously like played many other role playing games. Love board games, love deck building games like Dominion. Um, the yeah, lots of classic Magic the Gathering. Had experience with that, played that, and so this is kind of a combination of all of those interests kind of rolled into something. Um, a game that I was really hoping it for to be like to really love as I was building this game was the Marvel what's that deck building, the Suns,
Midnight Sun, I think.
Midnight Suns. And I'm like, oh, they're building exactly what I'm building here. And like, because I wanted a campaign and I wanted you to be able to have a story and build your decks and increase your decks around that story. And there are some similarities, but if I'm being honest, I was a little bit disappointed with the gameplay of the Midnight Suns, and I thought, okay, I'm definitely finishing my game here. I'm not stopping, and I mean, definitely my game is not Marvel licensed or anything like that either.
How long did you spend developing Mythical Mayhem?
So, uh, the journey started about 2 years ago, and I was kind of working out some of the design stuff and had a lot of ideas, and it was around then that was kind of giving up on my RPG that I was building, and I said, okay, well, if I'm going to get serious about this, like, set some boundaries, like come up with a design document before I start the game this time, and 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 say no to stuff that I might want or friends might want, unless it's a major improvement or whatever. But it's like, no, I'm gonna give myself boundaries and try my damnedest to stay within them. So that was 2 years ago. Um, and then something happened with my work. I had been with a place for 22 years, and some new management came in and they cleared all of the people with more than 15 years experience. They just chopped us all. And that was kind of difficult to go through. I'd never been through anything like that. Like, I'd been with them for 22 years and thought that I would probably work there till I retired. And that gave me some fuel and motivation. Lots of sleepless nights, lots of wondering what the future might hold. So once I got my head on a little bit straight, I focused and channeled all that energy into Mythical Mayhem. So it wasn't sleeping. I'd get down and get coding. I would, work on it. And it was good therapy. And probably if that hadn't happened, I might not be sitting here today with a finished game still. So trying to find the silver lining in that situation.
Mm-hmm. And as you were saying, you were inspired by games like Midnight Suns. We've seen a whole lot of deck builders and those kinds of styles of games. So, for Mythical Mayhem, like, how did you approach kind of like the card dynamics or building like the card system?
Yeah, so I wanted something that has some randomness to it. So there's a basic attack and a resource cost. So as a deck builder, I always explain it like as the basic premise. You start with some starting cards that aren't really that great, and you want to get rid of them or upgrade them and get stronger cards that have more combos. So I wanted a system that was fairly simple in my mind, but as I've kind of released the game, I've got a little bit of feedback that it is a little bit more complex than maybe I think, but in my mind, it makes perfect sense. But at its basics, your cards have two statistics. They have an attack value and a resource generation value. Some cards do both, some cards just focus on one. So the resource ability is to purchase new cards, and the attack value is to fight the foes and the arch villains. So lots of decks in the game too. Like the archvillain has a deck when you fight them, so every time you fight them, they get a different result, and you need to fight them anywhere from 2 times to 6 times. Like it's different for each archvillain. And then there's what makes up the adventure deck for the challenge is many other little decks. Like there's the foes, like 2 foe sets go into the adventure deck, and then there's a certain number of treasures that go into the adventure deck, and then there's kidnapped people that go into the adventure deck, and then it all gets shuffled together to make the adventure deck, which is essentially the deck that the archvillain uses to try and beat you at this card game.
And I'm looking at the screenshots for it. So, in terms of, I guess, like general play, is this just a case of you attack the opponent, get their health points to 0, and you win, or are there any other like interesting rules or systems in play?
Yeah, so there's lots of systems in play there, but that's it in a nutshell. So, but it works a little bit differently. The monsters have their own stats too. They have a life value themselves, and they have a defensive rating themselves. So, a defensive rating, um, that's how many ruins they get to roll when you attack them, which is the randomness to the attack to determine whether it's going to be successful. So if it comes up with a large shield ruin, that essentially gives them +1 life or takes 1 off of your attack value. If it comes up with a small shield, that's worth half of a defense rating, so it would take off half of an attack, them needing to get a full 2. And then there's other ruins in there for the mix. There's some wound ruins to give you wounds, which wound management is definitely a part of this game. Wounds just suck your deck down, they make it slower and not good. But I mean, there's many ways to get rid of it. And there's a treasure ruin, so you can get extra resources. And the ruins mean different things to the arch villain or to the general foes. And they work slightly different whether you win the fight or you lose the fight. As an example, the wound ruins, if you lose the fight, you'll get more wounds, even if like less wound ruins come up. But if you win the fight, you need to get more wound. Like one ruin by itself won't give you a wound. You need to get multiple to start giving you wounds. And then there's a couple of other ruins that do absolutely nothing, that are just there to make the randomness like the point that I wanted it to be.
And
go ahead.
Oh no, finish your thought.
Yeah, maybe in the future, if get successful, like there's room to expand on some other ideas and stuff with those ruins as well.
So you said earlier the game is not really a roguelike, it's just more like an RPG adventure. So I guess like how does like a general play of Mythical Mayhem like go through?
So there's 2 ways that you can play it. When you first get it, you start off with I believe after you do the 1 tutorial, you have 4 decks of heroes to choose from. So it's pretty. You get the kind of just the basic starter hero packs, and then if you're playing the scenarios, every time you beat one of the scenarios, you unlock a new hero. So a new hero deck which then you can use within the other scenarios. So that's one part of it, and that's the part of the game that I released in early access to the early access people. They could play these scenarios and they could unlock these heroes. And I've got 40 different heroes in the game, so there is a wide variety of these heroes to unlock with the base game. The campaign mode, you start a new campaign and you get to build your own card. So that represents your hero. So you give your hero a name, you say whether it attacks or generates resources, you give your card a name, and then as you progress through the campaign, you earn campaign experience by doing the missions. You start with again 3 heroes when you start a new campaign, and then as you complete each quest, which is a mission, like, and you go through and you play the game, you get a choice of what you want what you want to unlock. Maybe you want some more experience. Maybe you want another hero set to add to your hero stable. Um, Maybe you want some more campaign resources, which you can use to upgrade your stores, buy things from the market, buy new cards from the market in the various decks. So that's the role playing part of it, like really leveling up your card, and then you can unlock up to 3 cards. But like a trap that some of my players have fallen into is they go, oh, cool, you get to make cards and stuff like that, but they're not much better than a starting card off the start. So until you get campaign experience and have some saved up, you don't want to unlock the second and the third card in the campaign, because essentially you're just adding more starting cards to your deck. But as you play the campaign, those cards become very strong and you get them in your starting deck. So it really boosts your first couple of turns. Instead of being a slow deck building, it's you're hopping in there and you're kicking butt with those cards. Like once you get a level 7 card, they're very strong.
Can you modify or upgrade like any other cards in the game, or is it just like the hero or like those hero cards you were mentioning?
The primary upgrade is the hero cards. I'm not going to say you can't upgrade any other cards. It doesn't work like that in the most part. Like there are a few exceptions. You more get to upgrade your decks. So, as an example, there's a mercenary deck. So mercenaries are a part of the game, and you can hire mercenaries, and they've got things. So when you're playing the campaign, and this is only in the campaign mode, not in the scenarios, you go to the market and it'll go, oh, this Ronins are available in the market. So for 50 or 60 campaign resources, you can buy the Ronins, and now the Ronins become a permanent part of the mercenary deck. So anytime you go to hire mercenaries, you might get the base mercenary, or you might get the Ronins that are now in your mercenary deck.
Okay.
There is a little bit of card upgrade that does happen very, very late in the campaign, and it's only a one situation where you have a chance to upgrade your starting cards. And you can only upgrade, it's a choice depending on how you complete this one quest, and you either can upgrade the base resource generating heroes or the base attack generating heroes. But the hero decks themselves probably have 3 different tiers of heroes. So the stuff you get in chapter 1 are kind of tier 1 heroes, and they definitely can get the job done, and they can have some good combos. But by the time you get to chapter 3 of the campaign, and you're finding the tier 3 heroes, really they are quite powerful. And if you understand the game and understand deck building, I'd say the campaign probably becomes easier the more you play it, because you get the stronger heroes, you understand the mechanics better, and your base hero that you've built up is quite a bit stronger at that point. The villains and stuff are stronger as well, but I would say the power curve favors the player at that point.
Mm-hmm. So with kind of like the card designs, does the game feature like rarity, like tiers, like distinguish between bad, good, amazing cards, or are there any kind of like differentiation between like the cards like that?
Oh, for sure. Every hero deck is made up of 14 cards. So you've got essentially eight common cards, and then 3 uncommon, 2 rare, and 1 unique card, and that's within each deck. So each hero deck. So when you're recruiting your heroes, like some of their cards are more common cards, and some of the common cards are better than other common cards. But part of the deck building game and part of Mythical Mayhem is you want to search out the good cards. So you want to cycle through your hero deck, like once you get to advanced strategies, like that's what you want to be doing, not just taking the cards that are available to you, but maybe passing on some of those cards that you don't really want and cycling through to try and get the rare card that kicks butt.
Okay. And in terms of like card dynamics or kind of like card interactions, do you have any examples you can tell people in terms of, I guess, like what would be considered like a super powerful play in Mythical Mayhem?
Well, I'll share a little story and we can dig in deeper after. But there was one card set that was made that's called the Infinity Tome, and it's a rare card for one of the heroes. And so the Infinity Tome lets you draw another card. When you play it, you draw another card, and if you play a card that lets you draw another card, the Infinity Tome comes back to your hand. And because it's a rare card, there's 2 copies of them. So if you ever got 2 of them, you could just play those cards in infinitely. And some of the testers were spending hours posting these ridiculous screenshots how they ended up with 10,000 resources and that. I'm like, oh well, that's great, but you're not really playing the game. You're just going for the bigger screenshot here with the bigger number, and it wasn't breaking anything other than just the game became trivial if you could ever get that combo out. So I did nerf that ability a little bit and knocked it way back to you can use an Infinity Tome 13 times to that effect every round. You use it every time after the 13th time you use it, there's a random % chance that your Infinity Tome becomes unstable. And if your Infinity Tome becomes unstable, you lose your Infinity Tome and you get an unstable Infinity Tome. And then when you play the unstable Infinity Tome, something weird happens, but it's like it could be like it could turn all of the monsters in the adventure deck into rats. It could summon a big infinity monster, which is a big Cthulhu type thing with 99 attack, 99 defense, and just be a real menace. It could be like a Thanos moment, like, oh snap, and half the heroes disappear. So there's a few different things that can happen when you play that kind of make it fun. Or the other one that's kind of fun too is it could change half of your heroes, or not half of, could change all of your heroes that you currently have into cats. So then you're just playing with cats, and at that point, if you get something you don't like, you might just quit out and fail that quest and redo it. But yeah, so that's an example of one thing that got changed a little bit because of early access and how some players were playing the game, and that. That being said, there still are. It is a game about combos, and it is a game about crushing, like building up good combos. And see some people play it and they go, "Oh, like 10 attack, that's amazing," and it's like, no, that's you're still just starting the game. Like when you start getting 100 attack, then you're like, you've got your deck churning along, and you've built up some good combos with it.
Mm-hmm. And like with like deck building, like that kind of like roguelike design, especially like the last year or two, we've seen a lot more games kind of embrace like the more, I guess, like ludicrous side in terms of numbers. Like as we saw with stuff like Luck Be a Landlord, Balatro, and many others. And that I think is definitely like part of like the charm of some of these games. This idea that you can kind of solve it in a sense for that play. That if I have an archer and I get the cards that boost range damage, like something that magnifies bow damage, and then suddenly a 5 damage turns into like 65 damage, and people really do like that. Again, it's like one of like the thrills. Like you want to avoid in a lot of these games, like restricting everything to the point where only like one card is good or only one strategy is actually going to work.
Yeah, and the game is purposely made like there's no right way to to play it. And there are broken combinations. Like you get this hero with his powers, and you get this hero with his powers, and they just marry together like no one's business. But like to kind of make it interesting, that's why I've made different arch villains too. And some of them really, really try and work against that killer combo that those guys have, but maybe they're more susceptible to another card set. So, and also your campaign heroes can get wounded, so it's really encouraged. And when they're wounded, you can play with them wounded, or they can become incapacitated. And you got to wait, you got to put them to bed and let them heal up. But it's really encouraged that you play your different heroes that you have available to you, not just stick with your absolute favorite peasant hero crushing, peasant hero apprentice mage, merry minstrel, good combo that you like and have gotten used to playing. Like you definitely can do that for a lot of the game, but the game also tries to get you out of your comfort zone to try using like one of these other 40 heroes that are available to you.
And that, again, is another tough thing about these games. That the player likes something, they're going to obviously keep using it. If fire damage wins me every turn, why should I ever switch to ice or wind? And it is like part of like that challenge, especially like with a game like Mythical Mayhem and with like any kind of deck builder, about trying to make every single build or every single style deck, pop for the player.
Yeah, and like I said, like the one arch villain that the people that had a little bit of feedback is challenging is there's a genie, and she gives you a wound every time you draw a card. So drawing a card in deck building is usually the cat's ass. Like that's usually how you crush your enemies. But she beats you if you get more than 14 or 15 wounds in play. So you've got to really, when you fight her, you've really got to come at her with a different approach. Otherwise, she'll beat you. And the enemy I have the worst time with is one that a lot of people like to fight and like to face, and it's because of the way that I kind of have built up my play style for the game. And he's the circus leader, he's the ringleader, and you lose to him if your deck gets too strong and you get too powerful. And he does things like, oh, I'll draw you another card, but you also are playing it right now. So you just got to be careful and not be too successful against him. But I'd say that he's the one that I've probably lost the most to myself, because it's like I like to build up my attack, build up my resources, and then go and play my turn out. But
kind of reminds me of when I played a lot of your Runa, and I like a lot of like buff style cards or buff style strategies, and then there's certain balls that are just like, we're immune, all buff cards are null and void when we attack. So it's like, oh, well, that's great. Well, there goes this strategy. And speaking about that, with Mythical Mayhem, are you able to kind of like respec or like change your deck in the middle of a play? Like, how does like kind of like adding or removing cards to your deck work?
So yeah, definitely wouldn't be deck building without that. And like that's one thing. Like I've gotten some players that aren't really super familiar with deck building, but like in the one tutorial I do, I talk a little bit about deck building and the principles of it. And like when the monster eats a random card from you, or especially eats one of your lowest cost cards, that isn't a punishment to you as the player. That's a benefit. And you should be, instead of like mourning the loss of this peasant militia, you should be like, yes, thank you. You just made my deck stronger.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say, yeah, like the whole idea of a deck thinning. I think that's something that's very like weird to people who aren't used to deck builders. This idea, why don't I want a 300 card deck? Well, yeah, how are you going to draw that one card you want? One out of 299.
yeah, and I'm sure that if there gets to be some advanced deck builders, they will find Mythical Mayhem easy, even on a harder difficulty setting. But right now, a lot of the players are saying that it's pretty difficult. But yeah, hopefully that changes. And I have had a lot of positive feedback from the reviews that I have had so far. So
Hmm. And with kind of like, I guess like the philosophy of your car design, your deck building. That's something like I like to ask a lot of developers who make deck builders or deck style games. What was kind of like the approach you wanted to bring to like the design of your cards, or how did you create the various card designs in Mythical Mayhem?
so like I said, kind of came up with some rules like, have an attack system, a defense system, have like life, have monsters that go to certain piles, like either if they escape the city, they pillage it and they make a mess and then they go off to the lair, or if you beat them, they go into your trophy case where then you get XP. And XP is primarily like that's where I guess the other element of the deck building comes in. There's two other things that directly get rid of your bad cards or cycle them out, and one is the training hall, which is a store that you use. It's a location on the board, and you train out of a weak hero, and then you turn it into a bigger hero or a rarer hero, and you use experience instead of the resource cost. So you spend your experience and train these guys up. The other aspect of the deck building is the Assassin's Hall. And a lot of people, again, can't get over the fact that, oh, you're killing a card, but that's a good thing. Like there is a balance mechanic in the game too, like good and evil to kind of you know how are you doing, like are you using these heroes that are a little bit nastier and will hit
Mm-hmm.
below the belt, or are they all like holy paladins? And so when you use the assassins, you take one little hit to the balance, but it gets rid of a card from the tavern that's directly above it, so you get rid of a hero card, and if you're cycling through looking for the cards you want, again, that's a good thing. But more importantly, you get to pick any card from your deck, and you also get to kill that one off. So there are times when you don't want to use the assassins, but if you use them early and use them often, you're increasing the power of your deck. So I guess, yeah, getting back to it, like I wanted the cards, I wanted a real deck building feel where you start with the base kind of junkier cards, and there's mechanisms to get rid of them, build up a powerful deck. And I like the idea of multiple different ways to tackle it, or multiple different heroes with different powers. And like 40 is a high number, and I've got ideas for easily double that or more, but like I limited it to that. When I was first in early access, I thought, oh, I'm gonna do I'm gonna have 18 scenarios, and that's gonna be what the campaign looks like. But then as I got in writing it, I'm like, well, this is would be pretty basic or pretty quick. Someone would be able to blow through this in a couple hours. I want something more beefier and more chunkier. And I stuck to my format is every quest is going to at least, not that you have to take a new hero deck, but at least give you that option where you can. So like you can finish the campaign with 40 hero decks. You can't play them all. Like when you play them, you can only play 3 to 5 heroes. You have to limit yourself there. But and that's another thing that some of the beginner players struggle with and don't really understand. Like if you only take 3 heroes for most times, you're actually going to make it easier on yourself to line up combos. Um, because you're gonna have less cards to dig through to get the cards that you want. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not like that for every scenario. Like I said, like the arch villains, some of them have tactics where that definitely works, but some of them have tactics where they win if they run out the hero deck. So, and then if you're fighting them and you take 3 heroes, you're gonna it's gonna be they're gonna win easier.
Mm-hmm. To go back to something you were saying a few minutes ago about kind of like the morality slider or good evil, what happens like as it builds up like in either direction?
So in very early development, that was going to control kind of the difficulty in that. And then I quickly had some feedback, and even myself, it just felt punishing or wrong. Like, and people stayed away from dark cards like the plague, and it didn't matter how good you made the dark card. It's just like, oh, okay, well, you're drawing less cards now and it's affecting the game difficulty. So went
Mm-hmm.
and revisited it and put all the difficulty into the speed which the cards come out of the adventure deck. So then what it does is the if you move up the track, there is a couple of rewards you can get, a gift, like, so a heroic gift, a heroic reward, um, as you move up the scale. And then if you wrap the scale, you get a heroic deed. And a heroic deed can have, like, certain cards can go, oh, do this. And then if you have heroic deeds, do this extra thing. So you can be building towards like a good kind of run. And then the dark works the same way. As you move down the scale, there's dark rewards or dark gifts that you get. And then when you wrap it, um, when you wrap the negative, the arch villain gets tougher. So if you are playing a dark deck, they get a little bit more life, and it's not super crushing.
Mm-hmm.
But, and when you if you reset it or you rewrap it to the positive, they would lose that. And if you get a positive heroic reward by wrapping it to the top and you're in the positive, then you get an immediately draw an extra card as well. So yeah, some of the hero people that focus on white, the white essence or the light essence,
Mm-hmm.
which they can build super powerful cards. Like there's a power called good deeds, and I've left it there. But essentially, if you get good deeds rolling, you're gonna be able to pull through your whole deck. Like if you once you get 4 or 5 heroic deeds, the game will become trivial for you, providing you're not going against one of the archvillain's tactics.
Mm-hmm. And with kind of like the good and evil, you said like it adds like these kinds of positive modifiers, or it adds like these little modifiers as you get all the way to the top or all the way to the bottom. Do certain cards, are there any cards that kind of like respond to that? Like an evil
Oh,
card that gets more evil, or a good card that gets more good.
yeah, for sure. And that's what the good deeds is essentially all about, because it's like draw one card and then draw an extra card for each heroic deed you have. So it gets like I said, like you start getting a few of those and you get like 4 or 5 heroic deeds, and the game becomes very easy. But even the balance scale itself, like I wanted to use the mechanisms that I have in the game and like think of cool card designs for them. So like there's a honor card where Akira, the sword maiden, she gets a bonus depending if you've got where you are on the positive of the balance scale. So not necessarily wrapping to a good deed, but if you're up in the heroics, you get 1 extra point for everywhere you're off the neutrality point of that scale. So it's a little basic card, but it can be very strong if you can manage to play that balance scale with her. But just another little element to to make interesting, or I find it interesting anyways.
Right. And it does sound like there is a lot to this one. One thing I wanted to ask you before I forget, you mentioned, of course, that there is like kind of like a campaign or kind of like a story mode, and then you have a scenario mode. What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, so the big difference is with the campaign, you build your own custom card.
Okay.
So that's the one big thing, and it's an ongoing story. So you start, you start the beginning hero, and you chapter one's just kind of an intro, and then chapter two, a tragedy hits, and you kind of reset everything in the town back to square zero. But you also get to build the town up, so you can rebuild your town and pick which stores go in which spots. and there's even new stores that you don't get to see if you're just playing the scenarios. So you can put in an alchemist, or um, one of the reviews that I had said that there comes a point in the game where your deck becomes strong and you're just waiting to win the game by drawing the cards out of the adventure deck. You can't do it fast enough. So talked it over with one of my design friends, and we came up with the idea, well, we'll make a new location called the Dark Tower. So the Dark Tower is an advanced feature, and for people like this that really understand deck building and want to get through the things through the quest quicker, when they play the Dark Tower, it draws a deck off the adventure card. Not something you normally want to do because that makes it tougher for you, but if you're at that point in the game where you want to just win the scenario, it can come in very handy. And there's an upgrade for it. Normally a store can only be used if monsters aren't on it, and if they haven't already been used. But there's an upgrade to the Dark Tower called Always Watching, or the Eyes Are Watching, or whatever, and it allows it to always stay open. So if you have the money to use it, you can play it 10 times in a turn and just be hunting through the adventure card to find the quest object there that you're looking for to get you to victory quicker.
Right.
Yeah, and the scenario mode it's just a mechanism to unlock the heroes outside of the campaign mode, so you can play around with them. And in the scenario mode, there is a custom scenario mode too, so you can make your own scenario, like either really easy or really hard, by picking all the components of the game. So you can pick the arch villain, who his minions are, who his foes are, what quest you're going to have to complete, what what his dark saga is. So you can pick every single component that you want and then go play your own scenario that way.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I think with that, I do have some questions. I want to tell you a little bit more about kind of like the GUI and the playtesting side of Mythical Mayhem. But before we get to that, anything else regarding like the gameplay, flow of the game, card design, anything else along those lines that you would like to bring up?
Not that I can think of right off the top of my head at this point. Yeah, there's, like, with 40 heroes, there's a lot of variety there, and like I said, the heroes are kind of broken into 3 tiers, and each hero deck comes with 14 cards. So
Right. So, one of the things that we were talking about, like before we started the cast, was kind of like the challenges of I guess like the approachability side of the GUI. And for people watching, you probably clicked on the store page by now and looked at some of the screenshots. And I was looking at some of the comments as well. And one of the things that kind of sticks out is everyone just says like everything just kind of like hits you all at once in terms of trying to learn the game. And what I want to ask you about, in terms of kind of like playtesting or kind of like the GUI design, how did you approach building it as kind of like your first game?
my first game that I completed.
Okay.
So so yeah, many failures under the belt, or many even partial successes. But um, so I came up with the board, and I'm going, okay, I want the monsters to move along these locations. I want the locations to have stores on the top, location on the bottom. You can do different things with them. The monsters have tags, so there can be goblins, and they get bonuses in the caves or in the
Mm-hmm.
dungeon. Um, there can be other monsters that get bonuses when they're in the city, like a city dweller or a guard or something like that. So I came up with the board design, and I came up with a whole bunch of mechanics that I wanted it to have. Like, I wanted it to have a balance, like good and evil. And like I said, like when I first, like, it was based off of this uh, RPG that our friends and I had made. And in that game, like, balance was a part of it. Like, are you good or bad? And your actions kind of determine this balance. But I mean, in Mythical Mayhem, it works completely different. But I wanted it to have that element. Like, wanted to, are you good or are you evil? What actions do you take to be the type of hero that you are? And there's a lot of things that you can do with it. Like, I wanted the arch villains to be stronger, and I wanted them to have a way to win the game. Like, how is this arch villain going to win against you? Like, how is he going to use the adventure deck? How is he going to use the scales of balance in to try and entice you into either going down the dark path, or and getting him to victory once he kind of converts your hero to his side. So I wanted there to be these stories within that you could tell yourself, like as a story as you're playing the game, if that's where you want to go with it.
Okay. And with like the stories, as you were saying, like you have like these like the different like ages or the different sagas. How do like they kind of like apply to like what the player is doing? Do they like affect like what arch villains you're fighting? Do they like put like any like conditions or modifiers like to like the play?
Yeah, so other than one campaign story, it it doesn't impact anything that the other scenario that you can't build with your custom scenarios outside of the game. Um, and there was just something where I wanted the goblin encounter, the story with the goblins, to work a little bit differently, and so I kind of hard coded their deck to be to have a certain specific set of foes and minions in it that's not anywhere kind of else. So I kind of broke my own rule, and I'm okay with doing that a little bit for the campaign. But definitely the campaign is like, okay, like here's this great boar. So when and you go and you're going hunting, and the archvillain's this great boar, and so that's kind of the story that goes along it. You're going hunting and you encounter the great boar, and the quests that make it up, so you can win it. Like every scenario you can beat one of two ways. You can just thump down the arch villain and beat him with force, or you can complete your quest. So completing your quest requires you to do different things. So in that one, it's hunting animals. So if you defeat uh, 5 or more animals that have a base health of 4 or more, then you win the scenario. So sometimes doing that is easier, and sometimes beating down the arch villain is easier. And some of the quests can be quite difficult. Like maybe you've got to do 8 side quests, or the mythical one for the dragon boss fight at the end has you do 7 ridiculous things to beat the quest, like move the balance scale, get 1 dark deed, and then get 1 heroic deed, or whatever order you want. So you like draw a hand or draw 5 or more wounds in 1 turn. Like make you jump through all these hoops if you want to win the quest that way. But then, I've made 50 some different Steam achievements too, and had fun like building some of them. So if there's achievement chasers, they got to play it multiple times, and they got to beat the dragon in combat, and they got to jump through his hoops and beat him that way for 2 separate achievements there.
And I guess like to kind of like build off of that, in terms of I guess like the audience you're aiming for with Mythical Mayhem. Now, as we said, like this game is on the more advanced side. Like as you were designing it, did you originally intend it to be for more like advanced deck building fans, or like did like the market like change as you were developing it?
Yeah, so I made many mistakes, even with Mythical Mayhem. Um, it didn't really do market research to begin with. So, uh, yeah, and as I was building the game, my close net of friends or whatever that were really interested in it, they were like cool and they had ideas too. And the thing that kind of we didn't realize until we were quite far along is that it was difficult for other people to hop into, because for us it was just easy because we had built it up and developed it together. Like and even like I would invite friends over and go, here, try my game, but I'm giving them the live tutorial and say, hey, play this card or do this, rather than getting them to hop in and play the tutorial or read it on their own. And then so yeah, once it kind of became real and started getting some of this feedback, like when I launched the game, I believe I launched it with one tutorial. The game now has 4 tutorials. So I definitely take my feedback very seriously and listen to other friends that I've convinced to buy the game and had no interaction with, had heart to hearts with them and said, okay, like, I see you played this game for 2 hours. What's wrong with it? Like, what's the problem? Why aren't you having fun with my game here? And then, then sprouted up 3 more tutorials, like, because some of the stuff was second nature, and different people learn different ways too. So some people want just a quick hint sheet on a discussion board. Some people want to watch a video of people playing the game. Some people want the tutorials. A lot of people might like better tutorials than I can probably develop, if I'm being honest, and I would probably like that as well. But I did want to build a deep game, and I wanted to build a game that you have to think. And there's no undo in Mythical Mayhem, so it lives by a card played is a card played. You can't and you make mistakes, and that's part of the fun of it. But then, yeah, another reviewer said that he's not necessarily a fan of the complete randomness of it, but he loves when his cards come together. And I'm like, that's the whole point of it. It's like overcoming that randomness to come up with this combo, and that shouldn't just be luck of the draw. Like, you should, as a good card builder, you should be able to make that happen more often than not. Like, it as you get into the game, it becomes way less about luck. Like, did you get lucky? It's like, no, you know what you're doing, and you're building a deck and you're crushing your enemies.
Mm-hmm. And that, again, that is one of the hardest things I think to get across in terms of deck building design. The idea that at the start it is supposed to be very chaotic in terms of what you're supposed to be getting, because you don't have a build yet, you don't know what this deck's going to be. And as you were saying earlier, in terms of the game getting easier as it gets longer, that's what we kind of see from a lot of deck builders and deck building roguelikes, that once you kind of solidify your deck, then it's just optimization, drill it down, and you can have a 5-card deck that will just destroy everything because it's the 5 perfect cards for whatever build you want.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think you might have asked this before, but within the game itself, or maybe this isn't exactly it, there's a couple of ways that you can upgrade the attack or the resource generation through other cards or other items, but it only applies to the one match that you're playing. So you have to redo that kind of every time. Like, there's a card that every time you play it, it gets stronger by 1 attack. So, again, it starts off pretty weak, but it could grow to be your strongest card that you have if you end up playing it 20 times.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about that, one question I didn't ask you, in terms of the actual battle side of Mythical Mayhem, how long does a typical battle last for? I guess in terms of turns.
Against the archvillain?
Yeah.
How long does it take to win a scenario?
Yeah, I would say in terms of general combat, if you're going up against a monster on the field, how many cards does it usually take? Is combat turn based? Is it more we just keep playing cards until either I win or they win?
So, yeah, the monsters have a health rating. Mm-hmm. So you damage them. And then the archvillain, you need to damage him fully, all in one attack. So you can't wound the archvillain. He heals the full all the time. Mm-hmm. But the other monsters can be batted down a little bit. So, if there's a big rock troll out there and he moves slow, but he's just a big menace, if you have an attack rating of 6 and he's got 9 health, and you get lucky on the rolls and maybe he doesn't roll any defense, you can roll him down to 3 health. And all the monsters heal 1 health per turn if they're wounded. So then he would heal to 4. But now you only have to deal with them 4 on the following turn. Or you can just wait until your deck is strong enough to just beat them outright. But I mean, the game is meant so you can tackle your basic foes turn after turn. But you could have a turn where you have 50 attack. You can fight all the monsters as long as you still have attack rating left. So attack rating determines how many attacks you can do. Like, think of it as like a pool. Like, you have a pool of this resources attack, and as long as you have any attack, you can try. Now, attacking a monster when you have one in that pool is, there might be times that you want to do it because, like, as an advanced strategy, maybe you're trying to get a wound, or maybe you've got the great luck, a card with the great luck in play, and you're hunting or digging for a gold ruin because it does something. But most of the time, like, that would be senseless to waste one attack, because you are going to risk wounding yourself, and unless the monster only has one life, they're going to heal up if your attack is not successful. So then you would have been better off skipping the attack phase altogether, ending your turn, and building a bigger attack pool to go after them. Does that answer that?
Yeah. All right. Yeah, so it definitely a lot of, like, to go back to what you were saying earlier about, like, not doing, like, market research and just kind of, like, learning as you go. Like, that's something that I hear from a lot of developers. Like, when they are starting out, that it's very hard sometimes, especially if you're working on a very original concept, in terms of, will people understand this? And you said, like, the magical line to my ears earlier when you mentioned that it worked for me. Like, I understood everything because I've heard that so many times from developers, and it is unfortunately like a very easy trap to fall into. And I know, like, on the forums you were talking about, like, playtesting feedback, and you mentioned that earlier. In terms of, I guess, getting, like, feedback and, like, applying it, how has that been in terms of improving Mythical Mayhem?
Oh, it's been paramount. Like, and yeah, I don't necessarily do every bit of feedback that I hear, but I definitely listen to it, and then I will bounce it off a couple of my closer people that have had some input into designing the game, and I go, hey, what do you guys think of this? Or, would this make the game better if we could do that? Or someone, saying that they didn't understand this. Well, how can I make this tutorial to hopefully make it so that they can understand it? Or, what can we change to make this better? Because, like, I care about the game, and I care about its success, and you probably know this too, but, like, a lot of feedback that I get is, like, from family and friends, and they're like, oh, it's awesome, it's good, but that is, like, it's great to hear that, but that's not constructive criticism, and that's not going to make the game better. The game is going to be made better by someone who goes, yeah, why does this work like this? Or, I really don't like that mechanic. Like, and if you can't explain it, then they've got a valid point, and you should look at making a change or whatever. And circling back to one of the other points that you mentioned, very early on in here, I fell into the trap of every scenario needs to be stronger than the last scenario. And my friends, and I'm like, oh, I'm making a game that's challenging for me. Like, I'm having fun on this challenge. And my friends are like, stop it. Like, quit. You're going to drive away the new players. Like, make scenarios that are fun. Make scenarios that are beatable. Like, that they can crush. They can get that good feeling. Like, don't build the game for an audience of one. And so after some of that feedback, it's like, took a step back. You guys are right. Like, thanks for, hitting me on the head with that feedback and telling me that, because otherwise this game is just going to grow exponentially, and these scenarios are not going to be completable unless you are on the top of the, like, you're top of your deck building game.
Yeah, and again, like, I've seen that before, where let's just make every level harder and harder and harder, and people will gravitate towards that. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with Seth from the Strategy Informer, we were having this conversation about, in terms of strategy games, that a lot of people, like a lot of developers think that people want to be like super hardcore, pressured, and challenged when it comes to like tactical games, deck building, stuff like that. But a lot of the general consumers don't want like that level of extreme difficulty, and it's a very tough line to walk when you're trying to appeal to someone who has maybe 200-300 hours in a game like Slay the Spire or Balatro or whatever. But you also want to make sure that someone who's never touched a deck builder before can at least look at your game and go, "Oh, at least that makes sense."
Yeah, for sure.
I think with that, I am just about out of questions. So, I guess to kind of do some like wrap up questions for you, George. In like I said, like, in terms of when this cast will go, probably about a little over a month from when the game was released. Do you have any plans for more content or more work for it?
Oh, Josh, I the ideas never stop coming in my head. Like I could do DLC on this game for 3 years. I could, bring that 40 heroes up to 80 heroes in no time. I could double the size of the campaign with enough time and work. But it has been a large effort, like a large personal effort, still working full-time job, still doing all this. So as much as I would like to, and some days I really have to stop myself from building the next hero pack, building the next arch fill-in. It's like, nope, you can write that down in your design notebook, but hold off. And if the game gets some traction, definitely you could pursue it then. So yeah, the plan is if it's at all successful, I definitely will look at building DLC expansion packs. And even right when I was first designing the game, I almost went that path of building a free game and then having each hero set be a little mini DLC that you have to unlock. But I ultimately, like with discussion with various people and everything else, like some people like that approach, other people don't. And so I decided to give a fairly robust game up front. And then the plan is we'll add the DLC. Like, so, if I did a pirate pack, expansion pack or whatever, there'd be 4 pirate themed heroes. There'd be a pirate themed arch villain. There'll be a pirate themed foe and minion that kind of come in the game. And then what the plan would be is you can unlock those. I'll build up new scenarios, might add in some new quests and new dark sagas, like for the archvillain to win different ways. And then so for that one expansion price, it would be pretty low cost, like I don't know, $4.99 or something. You get 4 heroes and the extra arc fill-in. You get more in the campaign and kind of build it out that way. So that for sure would be the goal in the future, but it does need to be a little bit successful before I start down there.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any thought as to like what kind of game project you would like to work on next?
Always, like, I mean, there's like I said, like Mythical Mayhem was not the game that I most wanted to build, but it's the game that I knew I could finish, and I've got some unfinished gems in my back pocket, or at least I think they're unfinished gems, and maybe they're not. But uh, I think that if I did make another game, um, I would probably look at. I would probably go for something a lot more simple. I wouldn't build a as complex of a game. I would just build a more try and appeal to the to just a game that you can hop in and play without thinking about it a whole lot. Like, you don't have to do a tutorial, make it intuitive enough that, oh, you roll a dice and you move a pawn and you land on this square and you draw a card from here and you follow the instructions on the card. So that that has been kind of a thought that I've been thinking about if I did a game. Like, so now that I've kind of did my grand strategy deck building game, what's a simple type game that I could approach doing that, still try and make it fun and interesting, but like a lot more simplistic to hop in and play.
All right. Well, I think with that, George, that should be about enough or all the questions I have. It is a very interesting game, again, but for people watching this, I have not had a chance to play before we did our discussion, but I would definitely be interested to look into it. I've played challenging deck builders, and usually on stream I can either figure it out or at least break the game in some amusing way, bug-wise. I may be able to help you out in the future.
Well, I think we've got most of the bugs cleaned up. I'm not going to say that there's no bugs because that's ridiculous. My one reviewer said there's no bugs, and then the next patch I had like 20 bug fixes that they had missed. So happy that they had missed them, or people got into an area of the campaign and my son was playing it. And he's like, I don't think anyone ever tested this, but what happens when you do this? I'm like, who's going to do that? And he did it, and he's like, yeah, I'm stuck in the campaign now because you didn't think anyone was not going to, follow the instructions here.
Oh, yeah. You, again, as anyone here knows, never be surprised with how much gamers can break something. Even if you think it is airtight, they will find that way.
Yeah, probably the loosest area, or most likely you're able to break stuff, is the tutorials, because they're kind of a pain, but...
Yep, and tutorial design, like, that's another hour to 2 hour long conversation, easy.
Oh,
it is
nightmare.
Yeah. If there's two things you can scare a game developer with, it's doors and coming up with tutorials. Those are the two nightmares. I'm sure everyone watching just held their chest in pain as I said those two words.
Yeah.
But I think with that, George, we'll wrap things up for tonight. If you are free in the future, come back on and talk about any post-release support for Mythical Mayhem or whatever you have next. Let me know. I'll be happy to have you.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for hosting me, Josh. It's been good, and yeah, hopefully some of your viewers see this and check out Mythical Mayhem.
So to wrap things up for our conversation, anything social media-wise you would like to promote? X, Twitter, Blue Sky, Facebook, whatever.
I'm not the best at marketing, but
I'm the same.
I've dipped into my personal savings and I've hired a marketing firm, which is launching. Actually, it's launching tomorrow. So gonna see how that happens, how that works. So I'd say just check it out on Steam, Mythical Mayhem. I believe that with its release and everything else, and like the Google algorithm, if you Google Mythical Mayhem, the Steam page is right near the top that will come up for it as well. So,
all right. And you have anything to say to the fans or people who've played the game to take us out on?
I'd just like to thank everyone who has supported me and assisted in building the game, and special shout out to my son who wrote all of the music for it from the scratch. And yeah, so eventually a DLC package maybe will come up with his music or whatever. It's a hobby of his, and so yeah. And thanks to everyone that did support me in early access and the feedback that I've gotten so far, and looking forward to getting more feedback and more changes and some DLC in the future.
All right. So with that, we'll end our conversation for tonight. So again, George, thank you so much for reaching out. And again, congratulations on the release and best of luck with the future.
Okay, thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me.
All right. So for everyone watching us, thank you so much for tuning in. You'll find links to Mythical Mayhem down below. Again, if you are a developer working on a game or just want to talk game dev, I'm always looking for guests for this series, so reach out, Twitter, Discord, whatever, I will always be around. And again, if you're on YouTube, do the YouTubing stuff, check out the Discord and Patreon, support will go towards getting more daily streaming happening. So with that said, thank you again for tuning in, have a great rest of your night, and come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.